Today we're looking at the Heavy Division 787 for MSFS. This is a free improvement mod for the default 787 and a download link is in the description below. Let's take a look and see if it actually makes the 787 flyable now. So the first thing you'll notice from a runway start is the IRS is not aligned, although the switches are on. This is because the align time is set to real by default, but you can quickly change this to instant or your preference in the Heavy Division menu in the FMC. Whenever I start from a runway start, the IRS will be aligned. Other improvements to the FMC include a slightly different and more realistic UI, as well as basic custom LNAV with SimBrief support. So that means you have to enter your flight plan in the FMC or import it from SimBrief, as it no longer pulls through from the simulator's world map. So here we're just setting up a really basic route. We're specifying a departure and arrival, and we're going to fly direct between those two waypoints. I'm flying my usual test route of the Barkway 2 Sierra departure from runway 4 at Stansted through to the ILS 405 at Glasgow, taking a direct route between those two and a direct right turn onto final. You now also have to specify your cruising altitude in the perf page, as well as fill in some other perf stuff such as reserves if you've done fuel calculations and takeoff power. On the next page you just click the V-speeds and those are automatically calculated based on your fuel load and weight. You can see that after we've done that, our route is now shown on the ND, and setting up the autopilot panel will be very straightforward. We're testing out the custom LNAV and VNAV here, as well as specifying our cruising altitude in the MCP. It will be interesting to see how the VNAV performs, as it is only a basic implementation, but the default version is so bad that literally anything will be better. As usual, we rotate at our rotate speed, follow the flight director, bring the landing gear up as soon as we have positive rate, and we're able to activate the autopilot around 400 feet. I'm also switching on the auto throttle specifically here, but that soon switches over to its VNAV speed mode. The LNAV seems absolutely fine, and the plane has absolutely no issues following our departure route. Most of the issues with the default Asobo LNAV come at approach, so we'll see how the new implementation deals with that. As for VNAV, it does have speed and altitude restrictions in a way, in that it will restrict you to 250 knots below 10,000 and increase after that. However, it doesn't follow speed and altitude constraints specified in a SID or STAR. At cruising altitude, the correct enunciators appear on the PFD, the airplane levels out, and the VNAV page on the FMC switches into cruise mode. As always, at top of climb, what I do is I set my bottom of descent altitude ready for the top of descent further down my road. Unlike the default airplane, it doesn't automatically start to descend as soon as you dial it in, it correctly stays where it should be. And you also now have a top of descent calculation. Top of descent is now also marked on the ND, so we'll see what happens when the airplane passes it. Now there must still be some default code in here because Flight Simulator thinks everything is an Airbus, and at top of descent you need to manually activate the descent by tapping the button on the autopilot panel. Correct prototypical behaviour for a Boeing airplane is that it will automatically start to descend once it hits that top of descent marker. As we descend, we'll take a look at some of the approach stuff. So on the nav radio page, our ILS frequency for the destination has automatically been tuned, and we'll also fill in our approach ref. As usual, we'll go full flaps and slower speed. As we pass through 10,000, the airplane enters its deceleration phase, and as you increase the flaps, the plane gets slower and slower until you reach your approach speed. For some reason it decelerates to a kind of default value of 175 knots. It doesn't decelerate to the speed that we specified in the approach page, but we'll see later on that we'll be able to correct that. And at bottom of descent, it levels off at the correct VNAV bottom of descent altitude. As I get closer to the airport, I'll activate the localizer, and approach mode automatically activates after that, which again I don't think is prototypical for a 787, but it does no harm and it follows the correct behaviour of the localizer and glide slope arming on the PFD. As well as slowing to its own approach speeds, it also follows a slightly odd route towards the runway once you activate the localizer, to the extent that you actually see the glide slope activate before it picks up the localizer beacon. But this is fine, we'll trust it, and we'll see if it guides us to the correct place. Once the glide slope activates, it also switches on both autopilots as if you were going for an auto land, but this plane doesn't currently do that. So it does pick up the localizer correctly, and at this point, if you wish, you can also set your speed to the desired approach speed, so I've set mine to 134 knots here. No auto land currently, as I say, so I'll disengage autopilot, auto throttle, and land the airplane. So now our flight has concluded. A few thoughts on the Heavy Division 787. In terms of the basic LNAV and VNAV stuff, it seems a lot more reliable than the Asobo default. It doesn't have some of the sort of prototypical Boeing features that the PMDG would have, for example, and those lack of speed constraints and altitude constraints during SIDS and stars could cause you problems on VATSIM. I've always traditionally recommended against these sort of add-ons and plugins for default airplanes because the sim updates used to come so often that these add-ons would break very frequently and keeping track of it all was a bit of a nightmare. But now sim updates are few and far between and much more stable. I definitely recommend you install the Heavy Division 787. I hope you found this useful. If you did, please drop a like, feel free to subscribe, take care, and I'll see you next time.